curses and blessings actually exist, or do they belong in the fantasy movie industry? Hi, this is Barry Phillips with 10-Minute Torah, day number 4, the Torah portion Tavo. Let's go to the, should I say, famous or infamous chapter 28 of the book of Deuteronomy or Devarim. Verse 1 says, "And it shall be, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard to do all of his commands, which I command you today, that Yahweh your Elohim shall set you high above all nations on the earth." In verse number 15 it says, "And it shall be, if you do not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard to do all of his commands and his laws which I command you today, that all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you." So where do blessings and curses come from, and are they real? They are absolutely real. One could look at someone else's life and say, well, because you have a lot of money, a big house, drive nice automobiles, you have vacation time in abundance, etc., we would look upon their wealth and their prosperity and say, obviously they're blessed. We do not know if someone is blessed or not just because of their economic status. We can also look at someone who has had the worst of life, live in dire circumstances. Maybe they do without on most things that we would take for granted, and say they're under a curse. Again, the economic status of someone does not necessarily portray to us whether they are blessed or whether they're cursed. If it was all about money, then some very ruthless, ungodly, unrighteous people would be among the most blessed people on the face of the earth. It simply doesn't work that way. So, the determining factor is found in these two verses. It says, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh and guard to do all of his commands. And then in verse number 15, if you do not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard to do all of his commands. So obedience, the guarding of the commands, that is the determining factor as to whether one is favored and blessed or not favored and cursed. If a man worships his wealth, he and his wealth are both cursed. If a man in his poverty yet seeks to walk righteously, even in his poverty, he is a man of favor and blessing. The world just can't wrap their minds around that concept, that blessing can be manifested in any other way other than prosperity. So the conditioning word here, the conditional word, is the word if. If. If you will do this, then I promise to do this in response, either good or bad. So the blessings of the Torah are pronounced upon the people who choose to walk in obedience to the commands, and this means then that they come into a place of being covenant-keeping people with Yah. Here's a key understanding then. Obeying the commands of Yah. You can keep the rules. They may or may not benefit you. But because you have a covenant relationship with Yahweh your Elohim through Yeshua the Messiah, it brings you into a covenant relationship that has certain qualities and benefits to it. The benefits are not small, they're not insignificant, but they show up in a measure where he says, they shall come upon you, in verse 2, and overtake you. The blessings of Yah are that which cannot be outrun. Now, if we were to look at this, breaking it down, it's a chiastic structure here. In verse 3, we are promised both economic success, which says you will be blessed in the city, and agricultural success, blessed in the field. Then in verse 4, it says that the fruit of our body and of our cattle or of our livestock will be increased. So there is the fertility not only of the soil, but of ourselves and of our animals. In verse number 5, it says that we will be blessed in our basket and our kneading bowl. In other words, there will be plenty of food. And then in verse number 6, blessed are you when you come in and blessed when you are going out. That is military language. It is speaking about military success, which continues in verse 7 that Yah will cause our enemies who rise up against us to be smitten. They'll come out against us one way and flee 7. So there are 2 verses here that reference military success. Again, in verse number 8, following the chiastic structure, it compares with verse number 5 and says again that there will be plenty in our storehouses and that the Father will make sure that we have plenty of food. And verse number 11, again, our livestock is blessed in that the fruit of your livestock and the fruit of your ground in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers to give you will be plenty, it says. And then in verse 12 and in verse 12 and 13, it promises that Yah will cause rain to come to the land, the soil will be fertile. And it also says then that we will be blessed in our economy. So economic success, agricultural success, physical success, livestock success, supply success, and military success all follow those who walk in his commands. Now, here in the United States, that's not always been a consistent pattern. There have been times that we succeeded economically and with food supply and livestock, but there's also been times where we have suffered. We've had military successes, obviously. The Father has helped us to become what many would argue the lone superpower in the earth. That's really being challenged right now significantly by other nations. But nevertheless, none seem to really match up where we are at. Now, if we go into the curses, which we'll do more tomorrow, we understand then that things are not always what we would wish. But again, let's come back to this concept. One might take this word success. Well, I'm successful in my economics, in my holdings, in my investments, in my agricultural pursuits. I have a good family. I have a nice home. We're protected by a substantial military. What's the problem? The problem is that we look at our success and think one of 2 things, or perhaps both. One, we begin to say, it's like this. It'll always be like this. America cannot be displaced. America cannot be outproduced. America's economy is the greatest in the earth. It cannot fail. It has to succeed. Our military is far and above all that stand in competition to it. So we are just automatically guaranteed to win. That is a very naive and overly simplistic view of things. And secondly, even worse is that we would begin to worship that. We would worship the American ideal, that we would overly glorify that which we have known to be our society, our culture, and our American strength. Sometimes your strength can become your weakness. Sometimes your blessing can turn into a curse. If we fail to realize who it is whose hand of favor has been upon us and why it may have been upon us up until this point, and we began to glorify ourselves, get fat and sleek like Yeshurun, the scripture says, dependent upon the arm of the flesh, then we can be very, very cursed while living in what would seem to be blessed circumstances. We'll elaborate on this tomorrow, and until then, Shalom.